Greetings, fellow visitors. This is Upgrade Terminal, a Star of Providence fancast. I'm Malachi.
And I'm Nick. Welcome back to the facility. For today's episode, we once again have the lovely Ruben with us. Say hello, Ruben.
Hey guys, thanks for having me back.
It's a pleasure to have you back here again.
Welcome back, Ruben.
As per usual, we like to start our episodes by discussing something nice that happened to us this week, or notable or interesting. Ruben, since you're our guest, what's something that happened to you this week?
Something nice. I am probably found a house I could live in. I can finally move out of my parents' house after 24 years of them allowing me in.
Oh, wow. Congrats.
Yeah, it's not finalized, but I've worked with the... Okay, there's like a special section within like the city council that I applied for, like a house within like a... It's called like a neighborhood house where basically like a whole bunch of people live and you do stuff together. And I've always wanted to live in one of those. And they said I could probably find a spot within like 2 or 3 months.
Well, congratulations.
Oh, wow. I was really afraid if I moved out, get into like an apartment by myself, maybe get lonely. Like, because it probably have to be like outside of town a little bit, since living inside the city is really expensive at the moment. So this was basically the best case scenario for me.
I'm very happy for you.
Yeah, that sounds like an interesting setup. So can you explain a little bit more what that kind of living situation is? You said it's called a neighborhood?
Yeah, okay. I don't actually know the direct translation, I'm just realizing. But basically, you have your own room. But the idea is that like like 2 or 3 times a week, like you all eat together. Like it's supposed to be a more place where people get really familiar with each other. Because especially in the places where I've lived before, it's actually pretty normal not to be like too close to your neighbors.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's like the same in the US and other places, but I also was afraid that I would like go out of like, because I've never lived alone. So let alone going to a place that's probably outside my town where I'm not going to meet anyone. And the whole goal of these places is that they organize stuff like, hey, tonight we're going to all take a walk here. We can do some activities here or there.
Yeah.
Like they've got someone who organized it. Usually they're connected to the municipality who organized that stuff. And it's pretty nice.
So is there like a communal kitchen and bathroom and living room area?
There is one. You think you get your own bathroom for sure, but it's
that's good.
Yeah. I've also seen like student complexes where they have like a shared bathroom, and of all places where you wouldn't want a communal bathroom, that's like the first that comes to mind to me.
Yeah.
But there's a communal kitchen. I forgot what else you said, but yeah, it's designed in such a way where I wouldn't say you're forced to learn everyone, but they highly encourage like you to go around and meet other people and interact.
To develop a tight-knit community of sorts.
Yeah, exactly.
That sounds really healthy, and I think it's cool that you're aware of like loneliness as something to avoid. It's crazy that like loneliness is an epidemic in almost every society. There's been a lot written about this, a lot of people looking into it. And when you get really lonely, it's actually, you'd think that you'd be desperate to like go out and do stuff. But in my experience, like when you get really lonely, loneliness like will wrap itself around you and force you to continue to be lonely, you know? It's so it's a good thing to avoid. But yeah, congrats, Ruben. That's awesome.
Yeah. No, I knew about it because, okay, well, it's been a while since I would have say I've been depressed, like, but between like my early, like late, when I was like 18 and 19, going to college for the first time, I was a lot more busy. I didn't talk to my friends as often. I kind of experienced what you were talking about, like where I had a lot of opportunity to go out with other people, but I just for some reason kind of shut myself out of those situations. It's just been like that feels like forever to me now, but I remember how I felt back then, and if I'm gonna move to a place where I know I'm probably gonna have less interaction, I wanted to think of like some way, well, how could I avoid that from happening again?
Yeah, I learned that like when I tell like if friends invite me to go somewhere and I have my first impulse is like, yeah, I just want to stay in. I need to force myself to go out. You know, it's kind of like this sounds lame, but it's kind of like exercise in a way. It's like I need
Yeah.
to force myself into this situation because I know it's healthier for me.
It's social exercise.
And
Yeah,
you're always happy when you're like done with it, right?
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah,
when's it ever happened that you exercise and you're like, man, I better wish I hadn't done that.
yeah. I
It's
mean,
never
if
happened
it's
to me.
people and like, yeah, there's like almost no way you're gonna come away from that being like, dang it, I should have stayed in and just played video games by myself.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of why I got into the habit of organizing like a weekly multiplayer thing, because like I want to put in the effort to spend time with these people that I like and share fun experiences with them. And I'm very glad I got into that habit.
Yeah.
So, Makai, what's something nice that happened to you this week?
Last night I had the opportunity to go out and socialize. I had a friend of mine. Actually, they have been a guest on this podcast. Robert,
Uh huh.
a new player to Star of Providence. He's currently on hiatus. He's waiting until it comes out on Switch to really dig into it.
Oh, well,
After which, I will continue to peer pressure him to play the heck out of it. Um, he's currently playing Balatro, so
oh
and
yes,
and really enjoying that. So I did get him
yes.
involved in that. And anyway, he invited me over to his house to play Heroscape. Are you guys aware of Heroscape, the board game?
No.
I know it exists, but I haven't played it.
So Heroscape is, I don't have an in-depth knowledge of it, but it's a massive game that has like the board. Each time we play, Robert builds a different board, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like it's got mountains, it's got trees, it's got grass, it's got rivers, it's got water, and different terrain, and then there's lots and lots of different minifigure armies.
Mm-hmm.
So last night I chose to be a fan created army of bees. And so I had like the queen bee, and these are actual figurines. So there's all these little bees and then this queen bee, and it was me versus Robert and his wife. They were both separate armies. One was an army of like bone marrow zombies, and then one was like tree spirits. And I thought my little bees were going to get wiped out, but I made it pretty far, and it was a really good time. Heroscape's not something you can just pick up and play because it's got so many parts that you actually need to have to play it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of a fun treat to be able to sit down and play that game.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. What about you, Nick? What's something nice that happened to you this week?
Um, I wouldn't necessarily say it happened this week. Maybe actually, early this week, I would say perhaps. So one of the things I hope to do with myself with my with my time is I want to always keep listening to new music. I don't want to be one of those people that has at some point in their life has stopped listening to new music. I want to always find new things.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 weeks ago, an artist that I've sort of started keeping an eye on released a new music album. And so the artist is known as Slowerpace, and one of the things that they like to do is like they like to make soundtracks for games that are entirely fictional.
Mm-hmm.
So like soundtracks for games that don't exist, but just kind of this idea of like giving you a feel of what this game would be like just from its soundtrack. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought that was really interesting. And so 2 weeks ago, and I think I heard it just this week, they released a soundtrack called Pyromaniacs, which is basically this fake PlayStation game that's
Uh-huh.
very cyberpunk, rebels resisting, the government, and they're trying to take back a city. That's kind of the whole vibe, and the soundtrack is just it's there's no vocals. It's just trying to give you a feel for what it would be like to experience that. And I've just really been enjoying that. It's nice to listen to new music and to see these kinds of ideas being made, and I'm like, that's really cool, and I appreciate that.
Awesome. You said the artist name is Slowerpace?
Slowerpace, yeah.
But I find that idea so cool. I actually like as soon as you mentioned the name, I looked it up.
Mm-hmm.
It's got like the Pyromaniacs got like the cover from
Mm-hmm.
Shadowrun, I think. It looks exactly like it. But this one's really cool. I'll give it a listen.
Yeah. I like to just try and listen to new things every so often, just to keep broadening my knowledge of like what music can be and what I enjoy. And this was a very cool find. So, I mean, they also had another album that's just Barbershop Simulator, a fake Sega Genesis game where presumably you just are a barbershop, and but it has this very kind of sleek urban style. So you can imagine like there's songs in this where you're like, oh man, this sounds like really intense for a barbershop game, but you imagine like what kind of a customer would come in and give you a challenge, like, oh, I want this style, I want you to be super cool, and that I want this very intense music happening while it happens. It's just amusing to me. I just enjoy that.
I've always wanted that. That sounds really cool. I really support that ethos, Nick. Like constantly chasing after new things.
Hmm.
I think it's really rewarding to like kind of like dig through stuff and try to find some treasures that you like.
Yeah, just try to make sure that my tastes don't remain too stale.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's nothing wrong with trying something and not liking it, right? It's
Oh,
the
of
act of
course.
trying it that is rewarding in and of itself.
Experimentation in of itself is valuable to me, I would say.
And variety is the spice of life.
Indeed.
I've always wanted to go to a barber shop. I want to get to a point in my life where I can go to a barber shop and just be like, give me this crazy haircut. I haven't gotten there yet because it would impact, I don't think I could show up to work with a crazy haircut, but
So you're gonna propose then until you're like at retirement age?
yeah, no, that'd be even more fun.
If you still have hair by then.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that would be like the coolest grandpa ever, right? One who like imagine if your grandpa had like a really sick haircut.
Yeah. That's my goal. I want to be a grandpa that plays video games and listens to cool music and has a cool haircut.
I like that aspiration in life. Let's move on to the main topic of today's episode, which is going to be the weapons of Star of Providence. So, we came up with a little list of talking points
Mhm.
for the episode, and we're going to be broadly talking about regular weapons and then unique weapons, because kind of two entire categories in of themselves. And before we get into like all the specific points we wanted to make, a praise that I wanted to mention is that I like that, you know, broadly speaking, aside from some maybe a few very specific broken combos and maybe
Mhm.
some odd bugs, for the most part, the system is really balanced in that there is no perfect or best weapon. All of them have their unique traits and characteristics and even keyword combinations. And I appreciate that this game wants you to try everything and experiment with everything. It encourages you to constantly recycle weapons, constantly salvage, and that means getting comfortable with everything the game has to offer. And there is so much, and there is something to like in all of it. Even the weapons that I feel are kind of they're not that great, but I still appreciate them and I still get to know them because they're just fun to use, and it's fun to see to even if they're kind of quote unquote bad, I still like the challenge of doing well with them. And I don't know if that's a sentiment either of you two also feel about this game.
Yeah, for sure. It's I think a really balanced system that we have, and indeed, like sometimes you just don't get what you might ideally want, and then you have to pick, and then you kind of learn to use it effectively.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's rewarding to learn all of the weapons and learn how to use them. It actually one of my other favorite games, Downwell, does the same thing
Mm-hmm.
where at first it's like, oh, I don't want to take this weapon, but the Downwell in the same way as Star of Providence gives you health or charge for your gun boots for taking a new weapon, and so it really benefits you to constantly be switching weapons.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the mechanic works to keep the game feeling really fresh.
Hmm.
at the, as well. So yeah, it's I think I echo your praise, Nick. I really really enjoy that aspect of Star of Providence.
I like that the game makes it difficult for you to hold on to a specific weapon. Like, it's not impossible. If you really know what you're doing, you can. And I know that it might rub some people off. Like, why can't I keep this weapon? And like, well, because the game doesn't want you to rely on any one particular weapon. It wants you to always be able to go with the flow. And you're
Mm,
going unless you really know what you're doing, you're gonna run out of ammo, and then you will have to switch anyway. So, better to just get the salvage bonuses and become acquainted with all of them. It's why
yeah,
I, for fun, like to play with all weapons enabled.
yeah.
I just like doing it. Like, maybe if I'm speedrunning, I'll optimize, but if I'm just playing for myself, just play with everything on. It's more fun.
The true weapon is inside you.
The true weapon is skill.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's start our roundtable discussion.
Hmm.
So we're going to start with the basic weapons, the normal weapons.
Yeah, and the first point is what weapons we think might need some rebalancing or some adjusting or what have you. Ruben, why don't you start us out?
I think I have one that might be predictable if you know me at all, and I'm curious if this is the same that you guys have picked.
Uh huh.
But for me, it is charge.
Hmm.
Hmm. It isn't my pick, but
Okay,
Not my
do
pick
tell.
either. Yeah, go on.
okay, okay. Now I always felt like because the idea of a charge weapon, right? Like you wait and then you do like a big burst instead of being
Hmm.
able to like constantly tick 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 everything.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't feel the benefit of charge. Like I don't know if it's the spread that's too wide or if it's the like just the damage to the individual like pallets being too low. I always feel like if I could just shoot this
Mm-hmm.
enemy, he'd be dead faster. Even if I
Yeah.
get closer. It's actually I love the playstyle of charge in other roguelikes that shall not be named. I usually pick charge type weapons. Those are usually my favorite. But in this game, I just don't feel the reward for not being able to shoot for a while and then releasing it.
But is this something that you feel is a problem with the in a sense the numbers? If it's like angle spread or charge time, or is it a case of like a kind of almost identity, like like the weapon core idea just isn't done well and needs to be redone?
No, I don't. I don't think it's that. The last part where you said like where it's the core idea of the weapon being banned. I don't. I always try to refrain from being like armchair game designer. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is a game that I love so much that I could have never even dreamed up about if you give me a try. So I'm gonna fix it by saying you should increase the number or you should decrease the spread.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'm trying to come up with like a good solution here, but I haven't thought one out of like how would I fix this necessarily. I guess I'm giving this as player feedback. Where I'm just saying like I don't know the charge it doesn't feel good to use, which is something
Mm.
that's could be adjusted by just dialing the numbers a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe there's a more clever way of going about it, and there's some other games that I play where maybe some inspiration can be brought in from.
So very early in the game's lifetime, when I say very early, I mean like first 2 months, charge worked differently in that you literally had to hold down the fire button to charge it, and it would fire when you released it. So you could decide how much you wanted to fire of the weapon.
Hmm.
But
Mm.
I guess player feedback at that time was like, this weapon just doesn't feel good. So it was changed so that, okay, instead of just it's how long you wait to fire that determines how big of a burst you give.
Hmm.
And I don't know if maybe the answer is is going back to the previous idea or something new entirely.
That's very interesting. I actually didn't know this.
Yeah, this is very, very early in the game's lifetime.
That's very interesting. Is there a build that I can open up really quick?
No, there's footage you can see, but no builds.
Okay.
I don't think I would like that,
Yeah,
holding
that's
it down and then releasing.
Mhm.
But I kind of understand what you're talking about, Ruben. For me, when the game received the Relics of the Past update, which is now just incorporated into the base game, but whenever charge has the instant hit
mhm.
keyword, it feels way better to use for
For
me.
sure.
Yeah, so I kind of I think I hadn't thought about that really, but when I was listening to you say that, I was like, yeah, you know what? I really like using charge when it's instant hit because it feels quicker to me.
Hmm.
And I think it's really satisfying when you feel like your DPS is you're like constantly firing, right? Like the
Mm.
Vulcan feels more satisfying to use than charge to me because I'm constantly ticking away at the health. That's why the instant hit is a little bit more satisfying for me personally.
It's interesting because I know Pure has said that instant hit is probably one of the keywords that he's least satisfied with, because all it does is increase the speed of the projectile, and like the other keywords tend to give more utility or a boost or some kind of, you get a boost but you pay a penalty. So I find this a very interesting comment that, oh, instant hit is the thing that makes the weapon better. I'm like, really? That's fascinating.
It makes the weapon feel like cooler. I'll say that.
Yeah,
Like
it's like more
seeing all
satisfying.
the
It's
pellets
punchier.
like go in like an
Yeah.
enemy's face. Like
Yeah.
even if it's numerically, like if we bust out the calculators, like you're still doing the same amount of damage, it looks so much cooler.
Yeah. I feel the same with spear actually. Like when it's really punchy and it's just like boom right in the
Yeah,
enemy. It's so satisfying.
yeah. Almost forgetting that it doesn't do much damage, but yeah, then you're like, oh, this
Yeah.
is so cool. Like they're stuck and
Oh, I'll say
whatnot.
something about that.
I've got some words about spear also later.
I
Don't
have
worry.
different words about spear, but we'll get to that.
Okay.
Okay, Malachi, what was your pick for normal weapon that needs a bit of rebalancing?
So I think this one is well known. I think a lot of people have made this point, but I have to say drill. I
Huh.
love drill. I love drill. But when I play Star of Providence, I if I get a drill, it just seems a little bit OP. One of the changes in the Relics of the Past update, Nick, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think drill ammo was reduced, right? To balance it.
I don't recall. You could be right, but I can't remember right now.
Okay, well, I'm sure a knowledgeable listener will correct us.
No, I think I know what it might have been because drill has kind of two modes. You can fire drill or you can use melee drill. So you can hold on to the drill and use that. So maybe it was a change in one of those two modes.
Hmm. I think drill for me, it's almost, I feel like it's OP just because if you get in a room with cover, you can just hide behind the cover and just destroy all the enemies, and that's part of the appeal of drill. But I think that it just as it is, it makes it's just a little too easy. And I say that as someone who loves to use drill, and when I get it, I'm like, yes, I can just hide behind everything, and I don't have to be a strategic anymore.
And how do you feel when you have to fight against a boss where you have no cover whatsoever?
Yeah, I don't feel as good. That's like if I'm going into a boss fight, I'll probably swap from drill unless it's triple and homing.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of how I feel a bit about railgun. Is that railgun for me is excellent against typical rooms and lots of enemies, but against a boss, it feels very underwhelming to me.
Hmm. But yeah, that's my answer. Just drill. I think it's a little bit OP. I think it could be, maybe it is the ammo reduced even a little bit further. I don't know, but
Well, be careful what you wish for.
You know what's funny? I didn't even think of most in need of rebalancing as meaning it's too OP. Whenever I hear
Mm.
that in like gaming circles, it's usually a reference to something needing like a buff. Oh, this needs to be rebalanced.
Well, players
So
usually like it when things are powerful. They don't like
yeah,
the idea of like, oh, just make the thing that I love worse at the thing.
yeah. I just didn't even think. So when you said drill, I'm like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He thinks it's underpowered.
no, that's like I thought hard about this, and I was like, what? And I was trying to be honest with like my own play style, right? Like, yeah, I think drill like lessens the challenge in a way that I don't think the developers want it to become that easy.
Mhm.
If I pick up drill and then I'm just like floor 6 is a cakewalk, it's like, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, Nick, what about you? What's your weapon most in need of rebalancing?
Again, I was sort of conflicted about which weapon to choose, and I feel like ultimately my assessment will be in a sense similar to Ruben's, which is that The weapon that I feel needs to be tweaked, not even necessarily all that rebalance, but tweaked, is Fireball. I find
Mm,
Fireball to be, in a lot of cases, not all cases, but a lot of cases, kind of not that impressive. Because the thing that I think used to characterize Fireball is that it's a big projectile and it kind of damages things in like in a zone, in an area, right? That's kind of its thing. But to me, it always feels like, I fire it and it hits the first enemy in a row, and then everything behind it basically does nothing.
mm,
Which is why I always Fireball. It would have to have something like Split or Shotgun or Overheat for it to be something worth considering, and then it becomes quite a lot of fun. But I maybe it's this thing where I just Fireball isn't necessarily bad. It just doesn't feel as good as I would want it to.
mm,
So maybe if I there was a change in sprite, like saying I could better see the area that was being damaged, or there was kind of like an afterburn particle effect, something that gave me a better sense of like, am I actually doing a lot of damage to this? Because maybe it does, but it doesn't. I don't feel like that's being communicated to me. Like, I find the default Fireball to be somewhat underwhelming, and I don't know how to fix it. It I know it's a fun weapon to think about using, but to me it feels like it's just a little bit too reliant on certain keywords for it to be satisfying to use for me. And I don't know what the answer is here. I'm just like, it maybe could just stand to be even a little bit cooler. I especially just like how you fire the fireball and it hits, and then it just goes poof. It doesn't feel like I've really hit something with a giant ball of fire. It just kind of feels like it's a big round circle and then it disappeared.
hmm.
But besides that, I really don't have any real complaints about much of the weapons.
Yeah. Well, I to be clear, I don't think any of these are really complaints, but
Mm-hmm.
Fireball, I actually feel the same way about Fireball as Ruben feels about Charge. Like it
Mm-hmm.
feels really slow to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's definitely, again, as I heard you explaining this, Nick, I realize it's probably the weapon I choose the least, I
Mm-hmm.
think, because I also don't find it as satisfying to use.
Mm-hmm.
If it has overheat keyword, I'm more likely to choose it because that kind of gives me what you're talking about, where it's like that AOE, like boom, I'm burning. I can see where it's impacting, where it's burning, and that's a lot more satisfying. Also,
Mm-hmm.
if it's blue, I'm more likely to choose it because I just like blue fire more than red.
Yeah,
and
it's called fire.
and also to that point again, like charge with insta hit, instead making the weapon look cooler.
Mm-hmm.
Fireball with overheat is one of the coolest looking weapons in my opinion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is.
Yep.
And you know, maybe it's my mentality, think my biases, but I kind of think like I don't think a weapon should be reliant on a set of one or two keywords for it to feel good to use or to look cool. They should be like innately cool, and the keywords just make it even cooler. But I feel like for me, Fireball is in that position where if it doesn't have a few particular things, I'm not really interested in it. I'm sorry.
So we'll move on to weapons that grew on us, weapons that we didn't really like in the beginning, but slowly we warmed up to them. We came around to them. Ruben, why don't you go first?
I don't think any of you guys would have picked this one, but it's true for me. And the pick that I had for this was laser.
Oh,
I
interesting.
didn't like laser when I first played the game in like 2017, and I'll give you the reason why. This was so early in the game,
Hmm.
where both me and people who I'd watch stream the game, whenever we picked up railgun, it was like, oh, GG's runs over, I win. Like people loved that weapon, and so did I. And the laser was like a less exciting version of that weapon back then.
See, for me, the opposite happened, which at first I liked Railgun, and then I started disliking Railgun, so it became the opposite for me. But anyway, So at first you didn't like laser because you felt like railgun was so much better. What
Yeah,
what changed then?
I played more of the game. That's the first part. I realized laser, like, it doesn't always aim where you shoot it. It doesn't, like, even though it's fucking cool, right? Like, it makes that sound. It's like one of the early weapons too. Like, I noticed in the updates that they made, a lot of the weapons got like a little extra particles, a little bit extra oomph, and
Mm-hmm.
railgun already had that in the beginning, and laser was like pew pew, yeah, like a little laser. But over time, especially, and I'll cheat a little bit by saying this, but
Mm-hmm.
especially the keywords to me bring this over where, like, I really love the weapon now.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and we talked about it earlier, like it should be cool innately, and I like laser now a lot more just innately, but especially like pulse waves and like just hovering over enemies,
Oh
seeing them
yeah.
melt down. The satanic like pentagram you can get with like side lasers and
Triple cross beam
yeah,
lasers,
yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
like it's got so much cool stuff that I either just didn't try at the beginning or I didn't really get it that often.
Mhm.
Uh, but over time, I just love laser now so much more. It's in contention for my favorite, but I've reserved that for something else.
All right then.
My favorite keyword for laser is continuous. I think that's what it's
Hmm.
called, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Because the sound effect is so good, like that.
yeah.
Oh, it's so awesome. I just get a kick out of that, like that pulse, and then watching the enemies melt, like you said, Ruben, it's so satisfying.
To me, laser's pretty simple. It's just like over time, I learned it was better through experience. Like we talk about weapons, like they should be judged without keywords, but you never find a weapon without a keyword. It always has something, and
Mm-hmm.
laser's a lot of cool stuff, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Like a lot of cool stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah. If you get something like triple homing pulse waves,
Yeah.
that's
Oh,
delicious. Malachi, what's a weapon that grew on you?
So the weapon that grew on me is Pulsar.
mm,
I know Nick is a huge fan of Pulsar and has put Pulsar to very good work. But when I started playing the game, Pulsar requires you to get a little bit closer, a little bit up close and personal with the enemies. And as someone
Mhm.
who's not very good at shmups in general, that was really challenging for me. So it was a weapon that always felt unsatisfying to use because I was hiding in the corner and popping my head out and trying to shoot the enemies. But when I got a little bolder,
Mhm.
I was able to start using it and seeing, "Oh, okay, yeah, if I get right up in this guy's face, Pulsar is going to do a ton of damage." And I kind of learned how to enjoy the weapon in that way. I really appreciate this kind of game design. I don't know if it was intentional, but I like that I could go from a beginner, right? And I can have my favorite weapons. And as you gain more experience with the game, you learn to appreciate, okay, why would they have a weapon like Pulsar that requires you to get up close and personal?
Or in the case
Again,
of Ruben, a laser.
mhm.
yeah, exactly. And Down was one of my favorite games, so I'll reference it a lot. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
One of the things that I love about Downwell, and the same is true of Star of Providence, is that there are upgrades and weapons that in the beginning for beginners make no sense,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or some that make more sense. But as you play the game and you become better, those your habits shift. The meta of the game itself kind of shifts. And I think that that is a telltale sign of excellent game design.
It's like the game hasn't changed, but the way you play the game has, and so you
Mhm.
evaluate the elements of a game with different, priorities and different strengths that you assign to them.
Yeah, and the developers were thinking about that,
Mm-hmm.
like they were like, okay, what are the weapons that can help beginners, and then what are the weapons that players can transition into when they become more skilled? Like that's just so fascinating to me. I think it's just amazing design.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why Pulsar is the weapon that grew on me.
Oh, that's a very good. I'm happy to hear that now you like Pulsar.
That was also one of the contenders for ones that grew on me. But I always knew. Like, I guess the difference was I always knew Pulsar was good. I was just too lazy to use it for a long time. Like, oh, why
Yeah.
should I take the risk when I can sit in the corner and it's safe and I can dodge more and stuff?
Hmm.
So I think I've always liked it. I just didn't use it very often.
I mean, that is still a valid playstyle. I mean, I know for a fact For instance, Squega doesn't like it because he likes keeping his distance. And
Hmm.
I'm not going to tell that that's a valid playstyle to use. It's just if you want something that's a little bit more proactive and aggressive, then yes, that becomes more valuable. But if that's not something you want, that's all right. You just pick something else.
If you want to get your pulse racing, go with Pulsar. I'm sorry, Nick. All right, Nick. What's the weapon that grew on you?
So I actually have two picks for this. The first one is Revolver. When I first started playing, I did not like Revolver. I was like, oh man, I mean, I guess I'll play with this, but there were two things I didn't like, or rather, two things I didn't like because of the way I perceived the weapon. I
Hmm.
always thought, like, the charge delay, oh, it's too long. Why can't I just do like Vulcan, just fire constantly or continuously? Why do I have to have this waiting period? And to me, it always felt like it did okay damage, but it didn't do quite enough damage. I was like, again, newbie player, I think that this weapon sucks. And then over time, one of the things that improved a lot was my aim, because
Hmm.
when I'm starting with the game, I'm kind of not really aiming. I'm just kind of like trying to dodge and not get hit. And avoid the enemies, I'm just like just throwing bullets over there somewhere, and it just feels like I'm wasting my ammo. But as I got better at the game and I realized, okay, I know the enemies, I know the layouts, so I can so dodging becomes second nature. I can focus more on aiming exactly not just where enemies are, but perhaps where they will be. So I can predict their movements better and I can make better use of my ammunition. And when I started doing that, I realized revolver is actually a pretty capable weapon. It's not my favorite still, but I've come to realize you can dish out a lot of damage with revolver, and the cooldown period is not really as much of a problem if you're hitting your shots, because then you need less shots and you do less waiting. So it kind of rewards with, like, if you aim and you hit things, then this you have to suffer through less of the waiting, and then it becomes more fun. And you know, one of the and this weapon doesn't need this keyword to be good, but I do love auto hammer as a keyword. I think it's so
Oh,
cool when, like, instead of going pew pew pew, you imagine like the character fanning the hammer of the robot, just pa 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 pa, just brrr. And I
Yeah.
love that. And I loved when when I really discovered when you can just snap your aim in another direction in the middle of the auto hammer. It's not like laser where if you're firing it, you turn slowly. This is a deliberate design decision. You can
Hmm.
just snap aim to something else. So you can do da 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 da. And that to me feels like, oh, that is so cool that I can just do that. And I can
Hmm.
really make use of this. That's, yeah. So that is part of why I now like Revolver a lot more than I used to.
Makes sense.
And the second pick is Spear. I actually kind of like Spear. And I think I understand why some people don't like it. It can feel unsatisfying to use. It can feel like it's not doing much because the gimmick that it has is that it deals damage over time.
Hmm.
It is not doing its dealing its full damage up front. You kind of have to wait a few seconds, and I get people don't like it, and I do feel like there's not enough keywords that really complement that. There's not enough keywords that really take advantage of that damage over time effect. But I still think like it still does pretty good damage for what it does if you again take up account for all of its damage. I like that if the initial shot, the initial projectile, is enough to destroy an enemy, the spear goes through the enemy, pierces them, and continues on to hit an enemy behind. So it's like the projectile is not wasted. You still get to hit multiple things with it. And I particularly remember one monorail tournament that I beat Overlord with a spear, and what it had was backshot and ricochet. Because if you line yourself up perfectly, the shot you aim hits it, and then the shot that goes from the back goes back, bounces, and also hits Overlord. So I'm dealing double the damage as long as I'm
Mm.
just aiming, keeping my aim correctly. And once you realize, like the additional shots still do a lot of damage, I'm like, this is pretty cool. I do think it could still stand to have a little bit more synergy with keywords, but overall, I feel like it is surprisingly capable. And I just like its gimmicks. So I'm not saying it's the best. I'm saying now I like it.
I find Spear actually super satisfying. I love having the way it lodges into enemies and I know it's still hurting them. And also, if it has instant hit on it, in the same way I find Charge more satisfying, instant hit with Spear is just like, yes, right into the enemy.
Such a cool sound it makes too.
It is fun to see when you're fighting an enemy that has a lot of HP, you see all of the spears still embedded on it.
Yes, yes. And to know that that's like sapping their health. Yeah, that's just super satisfying.
And now we move on to the favorite weapon. So, Ruben, what is your favorite weapon?
So I cheated a little bit on this one. I okay. Well, I'm getting a name too that I think it'll make sense once I start talking about it.
Uh-huh.
But my favorite weapon used to be my favorite was Runic
Uh-huh.
before the update where they completely reworked it. So in Relics of the Past, they changed how Runic worked. It used to be that you had like a so you had the same like sigil surrounding your ship like
Mhm.
the whole time, but it was basically like a machine gun fire
Yeah, I
where
remember that.
it would center like all the shots a little bit like ahead of where the player was, and then it would like scatter like
Mhm.
around. I for some I can't tell you why now because it's been so long, but I used to love it so much. It felt so about it was like the reward, of course, for beating
Monolith?
Monolith. Yeah. Uh, so it got that kind of it brought out a special feeling in me as well. Both
Mhm.
how cool I thought the weapon was and the significance in how you acquired it.
Mm-hmm.
But then they completely changed it, and I'm not a big fan of it anymore. No,
So
it's
what are you a big fan of these days?
I would say my favorite weapon right now. I definitely don't think any of you have picked this one, but it's Razor. That's my favorite.
Ooh, but I like that choice.
It's just I don't know. Like this is I almost don't know where to start with this one. I just find everything about it so cool. How it goes through enemies, it goes back. I love basically all the unique keywords that it has. Again, you should judge it by it not having keywords, but I'm gonna do it anyway because there's so many cool ones that I
Ring
always think
shot,
about.
for
Ring
one.
shot, instant recall, where you just fucking
Beep,
go
beep, beep,
through.
beep, 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 beep,
Yeah,
beep, 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 beep.
that's like the
Yes.
coolest thing ever, in my opinion. Uh, the extra like chain lightning it makes, like it just covers the screen so much.
Mhm.
And again, like maybe something that's a bit of a recurring pattern in a lot of what I'm saying. I like very much the aesthetic of weapons as well. I like
Mm-hmm.
charge when it looks cooler. I liked uh, laser when it's the pentagram. I like the old runic because of how the screen filling, demanding it was, and the same goes for razor. It's a very pleasing weapon to use, in my opinion. I
Mm-hmm.
could play it without keywords; it's just still perfectly fine. But it just notches over to my favorite with all the cool things you can always get, especially with the item that can where you can like pick up new keywords. I will always pick up a razor in case I find something, and then I win the run.
Mm.
It's
For me, one of the keyword combos with Razor that's funny, it's giant, ring shot, and
yeah,
lance, or chariot. And it's just like I just have this area around me that I just damage, and
yeah.
it's funny to me.
It's also it's also so versatile. Like you can have it be shielded. It can it works to so many playstyles too for whatever I really need in the moment. So maybe more than all the other weapons, but I have to think about that. Maybe that's not
No,
quite right.
it's your favorite, and you love it,
Mm.
and I love all the
Mm.
reasons you're giving me for it.
But that's I was going to considering maybe putting in laser for the exact same reasons that I like razor, right? Because it's so demanding, so cool with all the things you can do with it. But yeah, if I had to give a final answer, it'd be it would have been Runic if you asked me 4 years ago, but now I would say it's probably Razor.
And more like 5 years ago.
Was it fight? No, there's no way. March. The time doesn't march on that quickly.
Relics of the Past was released on Christmas Day 2019.
Oh, jeez.
Oh. uh, while Ruben is suffering from that, Malachi, what's your favorite weapon?
So I've got two on here as well. The first
Oh.
one is Runic, and
Oh.
I agree that I liked pre-update Runic a little bit more. But the thing I love about Runic is basically what Ruben already touched on. The fact that it's a reward that you get after defeating Monolith.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the first time using it is so cool because the runes. Basically, what I love about it, like, it just comes down to the aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
It feels so good to be using something that's like from the enemy camp. It's like, ooh, I've got runes now. Like, it's like using something forbidden or something that's taboo. And I think the game does a really good job of making me feel powerful when I'm using that weapon.
Mm-hmm.
And just the runes, again, it's one I really love getting if it has the freeze keyword, because blue runes, come on, it's awesome. So just aesthetic alone, Runic is my favorite. I think it's very, very cool. The second one is Razor.
Nice. Very good.
It's Razor.
Let's go.
Yeah. So Ruben, we're on the same page. But Razor, for the same reasons you said, it's so satisfying to use. My favorite keyword on it is triple.
Yeah.
You're launching, and if you have triple and instant recall, you're turning every room into a blender, and it's it's just
It's
so
so
satisfying
fun.
to use. Yeah, it's so fun. I love it. I also love that it cuts through everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So you can clear out crowds of cute little ghosties pretty quickly.
It is a very powerful weapon.
It's definitely got some cheese too on some bosses where they have armor. Oh, okay. There's this like database mini boss that's like a ringleader inside armor. You don't
Yeah.
have it anymore. Goodbye. Razor just deals with it. Like I love sometimes when it's just like the perfect thing to just melt something in like milliseconds.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's very powerful indeed.
Nick, what about you?
Well, mine isn't Razor, unfortunately. And I think people who know me know exactly what my favorite is. It's Pulsar. I love Pulsar. I wouldn't say I was the first person to realize that Pulsar was good. I think there were plenty of people before me who realized, oh, yeah, Pulsar's pretty good. But I do think I was one of the people who really found just how powerful it can be if you're willing to play extremely recklessly. Because part of why I like Pulsar is that it is a high risk, high reward playstyle. You have a purposefully limited range. You can't attack from the other side of the screen. You can't really hide in the corner. And the closer you get to an enemy, the more likely it is that you'll do tons of damage. There's still a little bit of spread, but I just like, because it is rewarding me for being aggressive, for getting in enemies' faces, and I just still like it because once I found the God Pulsar combo, and I realized I can do astounding amounts of damage if I can get close to the enemies, because I know the patterns of the enemies, their timing, their movements, their attack, the ways they attack. This weapon allows me to fully exploit that knowledge and reward me with, like, if I play well, I can destroy them way faster. And that to me is exhilarating. It is thrilling. I love weapons that encourage aggressiveness and reward you for it. That high risk, high reward playstyle is something I very much enjoy. And for me, Pulsar is the best representation of that idea. So it's not a surprise. People could kind of see it coming, but it is what it is.
I think if had we phrased the question as which weapon do you think is the best, I would have maybe said Pulsar, uh, because I fully fully agree with everything you've said so far. I don't think I always lived by it. Like I definitely was living my career like, oh, I know this is better, but I'm so used to playing the way I do, I'm not going to actually switch to it. But I think if I picked up, like, I'm picking up Pulsar more and more nowadays. Whenever I see, I'm like, oh, it's go time. There we go. Maybe we can get the god like keyword set up. Like I'm always looking out for it.
But I do have to always remind myself that it's not a weapon that's necessarily good for beginners. Like Echofire, you talk about this, how as you grow better at the game, your evaluation of these things changes. And Pulsar is one of those weapons that first can seem very underwhelming. Like, why would I pick this up? It's only when you know the game a little better and you can sort of use that knowledge, then it's when it becomes rewarding. And it's why one of the last weapons to be unlocked just before Runic, and that makes sense to me. Like it is a weapon that you need to use well. You need to you need to aim it well. You need to get close to enemies, and it requires just a little bit of courage. But for me, it's perfect, and I'm very happy with it.
Thanks so much for listening to our Star of Providence fan cast. Big thanks, as always, to Garoslav for allowing us to use his music and sound effects.
You can check out all of the Star of Providence soundtracks in the Bandcamp, Base Game, Relics of the Past, and 5th Anniversary Edition. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you again in Part 2.